Hey all, what's going on? You're listening to Chicago Humanities Tapes, the audio arm of the live Chicago Humanities Spring and Fall Festivals. I'm Alisa Rosenthal, and today I'm joined in the studio by Iranian-American poet, novelist, and scholar Kaveh Akbar for a behind-the-scenes chat about his novel Martyr, plus a brief preview of his live Chicago Humanities event on October 26th, in conversation with fellow Midwestern author John Green. Tickets for Kaveh Akbar, Seeking Meaning in Faith, Art, and Others at Northwestern University are available at chicagohumanities.org. There are many other awesome programs that day, including U.S. Poet Laureate Natasha Trethewey and legendary director Barry Sonnenfeld of Men in Black, Get Shorty, and The Addams Family fame. Kaveh Akbar was born in Tehran, Iran, and teaches at the University of Iowa. His poems appear in The New Yorker, The New York Times, Paris Review, and Best American Poetry, among others. His debut novel, Martyr, has just been announced on the 2024 National Book Award shortlist for fiction. Martyr follows the protagonist Cyrus Shams, an Iranian-born nearly 30-year-old who struggles with addiction, sexuality, and being alive. While the novel is fiction, it's centered around the real historical tragedy of Iran Air Flight 655, a passenger flight shot down by a U.S. Navy warship in 1988. All 290 passengers on board died instantly, including Cyrus's young mother. Now living in Indiana, Cyrus becomes obsessed with the concept of martyrs. What was the point of his mother's death, or anyone's? This conversation contains a brief reference to suicide. If you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available. Call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org. This is Kaveh Akbar with myself in September 2024. Kaveh, hi. Thanks for joining me.
It's nice to meet you.
Alisa, yeah.
Alisa.
I have your book. I finished it.
Oh, no way. Thank you for the gift of your time.
Of course. I bought it from my neighborhood punk feminist bookshop of choice.
Women and Children First?
Women and Children First.
So you're in Andersonville?
I am in Andersonville. So you know you're Chicago.
Yeah. I grew up. I've been in the Midwest most of my life.
Yeah. And you're in Iowa City now, which my alma mater. I went to University of Iowa.
Oh, no way. No way. That's crazy.
So you're the head of the creative writing department, which I believe started right after I graduated.
Yeah. I've only been here 2 years, so I'm still fairly new, but I love the city.
Yeah. I mean, I have obviously questions about your book, but I have so many questions about Iowa City.
Yeah, I really like it.
Is Oasis still the spot for falafel?
Mm-hmm. My spouse is a vegan, so we eat a lot of falafel from there.
Good. Mm-hmm. I think I've been feeling like especially nostalgic for college. It's 80 degrees in Chicago today, but
Sure.
It's been feeling really autumnal and school's back in session. Yeah.
I'm going to teach after this.
Oh, good. What's on today's docket?
I am teaching my Writing the Divine class, and I think we are talking about Gilgamesh today.
A character name in your book.
Yeah, you really read it. Yeah.
Yeah. I picked it up and I was like, great, I'm reading it for this interview. And then I feel like I was on a race car into hell of reading. I really loved this book. I think it's going to stay with me for a really long time. And something I was really struck by was this book deals with big topics, identity and addiction, but also brings in characters that I really fell in love with and a lot of storytelling devices and narrative. Your background is in poetry. So what was the process of making narrative in poems versus making narrative in something like a novel?
Yeah. That's a perceptive and generous question. I don't know that my poems are super narrative. I think what propulsivity lives there is a kind of rhythmic propulsivity, a lyric propulsivity, more than the expectation of a resolving narrative, which is different, obviously, than a novel, most novels. So all of that, learning narrative at all was something that I had to educate myself about. The whole time I was writing the novel, I've spoken about this elsewhere, but I was reading 2 novels a week and watching a movie a day, just sort of foie gras ducking narrative into myself, and reading and watching utterly kleptomaniacally, when you read Bluest Eye, you see how Morrison gives you these extraordinary sentences that, you know, could be hung up in a museum next to Still Lifes by Cezanne. And also within them is giving you, say, the floor plan of Piccola Breedlove's house. You know what I mean? Like you feel like you could walk through that house by the end of it because you understand so well where everything is, and that's just marbled through the prose, right? It's not like
Yeah.
here's 3 paragraphs of exposition about the, you know, and that sort of gesture, you know, writ large, you know, when you read James's Portrait of a Lady, you know, I have a better understanding of those characters' finances than I do of my own finances. You know, like
Yeah.
truly,
Yeah.
you know, and the way, again, he marbles that through the prose in a way that doesn't feel sort of cudgeled in, you know, in a way that feels truly organic is remarkable. And again, something I had no experiential referent for in my creative life.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine learning by doing, taking it all in. The book hits a lot of things you'd expect from a novel in that there's a lot of drive and there's a lot of people I'm rooting for. But it also got kind of weird and off the rails at various points.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious in what makes this book so weird and what drew you to making something kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, there are no isolated zones of contemplation within my psycho-spiritual experience, right? I don't have one lobe of my brain for being in love with my spouse and another lobe of my brain for feeling sad about Gaza. And I don't have one lobe of my brain for feeling rapturously delighted by my dog who's asleep here by my feet, and another lobe of my brain for thinking about the Iran Air Flight 655 massacre, right? I mean, it's all in there sloshing around, right? And so the same me who feels extant rage 36 years after the Iran Air Flight 655 massacre is also the me who loves and quotes The Simpsons constantly and watches NBA basketball religiously. And you know what I mean? And there's no partition between those things. And to artificially represent consciousness otherwise, to create characters who walk around thinking these grand monolithic thoughts that eclipse all other thinking is just, I mean, if that's anyone's experience of the world, it's certainly not mine, you know? And so I wanted to make a book. I want to make books. I want to make poems that feel consistent with that experience of everything all the time at idness.
Yeah, and I think in your protagonist, Cyrus Shams, that you refer to him as he's between all of these different worlds, between all these different identities, between being, you know, Iranian and American and gay and straight. But at the same time, it's really representing all of these identities pretty fully.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, as you've been on a really large book tour, have you had any experiences from audience members or people coming up to you who feel really represented in this character, in these characters?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the miracle of art is that the more singular you get to your unprecedented existence, the more universal it becomes, right? Like, ostensibly, the most universal art one could make would just be, you know, a sheet of paper that said, "I am sad," right? But that's not going to move anyone. You know what I mean? Like, that's not going to, because it's so general, and one thinks that generality goes with universality, but for whatever reason the inverse is true with art, right? Like, this is a book that orbits Muslimish, Iranian American, recently sober addict alcoholic who's kind of gay, kind of queer, kind of a writer, driftless, obsessed with suicidality, right? Like, if you did that identity checkbox Venn diagram, right, the population is one. You know what I mean? Like, you're talking to that person, right? And so that anyone can see themselves in this work reflects that fundamental miracle of art, right? Like, I've never been I've never been a whaler, right? But when I read Moby Dick, I feel profound simpaticos and amongnesses and divergence. You know what I mean? This is how literature works, how art works.
Yeah. And you brought up another concept that I really loved, which is a bit of a turn, but the use of 90s nostalgia. Lisa Simpson is a character who pops up, and I was really interested in how those kind of interplay.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, again, like I'm indelibly shaped by my environment, right? I don't just, sit on a mountaintop reading Proust with a falcon on my shoulder. You know what I mean? Like I watch the NBA. I'm obsessed with The Simpsons. I mean, I met my spouse because of The Simpsons. It's a huge part of my life. It was my introduction to, I mean, I knew the plot of Hamlet before I ever read Hamlet because of The Simpsons. I knew all the Kubrick films before I ever saw Kubrick because of this. You know what I mean? Like it was my introduction to so much of the high art um that has animated me, in adulthood, right? The idioms of my language are indelibly inflected by it, but so are the algorithms of my thinking, right? My humor, right? Is, there are a few influences on me creatively that are more significant than The Simpsons, right? And so again, I can't just write a book where I only talk about Rumi and Hafez. You know what I mean? Like this is a huge influence on me. And I wanted to make a book that feels consistent with the experience of being alive on the planet Earth. And my experience of being alive on the planet Earth is being a person who reads Virginia Woolf and Nabokov and Morrison and Borges, and also watches a crap ton of The Simpsons, and also, loves Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and all of this stuff is in there.
Yeah, and I think the way you take dreams really seriously to play out some of these conversations and ideas, I thought was really interesting and felt really cinematic.
Hmm.
What was the process like of visualizing that or playing out those scenes?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by dreams. I love talking to people about their dreams. I know that some people roll their eyes or whatever it's like some people treat it like you're talking about your fantasy football team or something. But I always love, I mean, it's like we spend a third of our lives, with our brains putting on these elaborate productions for us, cast with characters from our actual lives, behaving in these sort of strange, gnomic, terrifying ways. And we're not supposed to talk about that. Instead we're supposed to talk about the weather or whatever. I think I'm right. I think I'm right to be really interested in dreams. Every morning when we wake up, I ask my spouse if they've dreamt, because if they have, I get to start the day with my best friend telling me a story. This feels just objectively right. And and so again, I'm fascinated by dreams, and I love art that is fascinated by dreams. I love Marquez and Borges, and so I wanted to figure out a way to make those a part of the art that I was making without it seeming like bloat or, just like a distraction from the plot or whatever. And actually, one of the big influences on the way that I did it was The Sopranos. In The Sopranos, Tony, a big part of the show is, you see Tony's dreams and no one like rolls their eyes or fast forwards past them. And I was like, why does it work? And you realize that in The Sopranos, important load-bearing narrative information is being revealed in the dreams. Like the dreams go out a little bit ahead of Tony's consciousness. And uh and so that's something that I stole. Like I tried to make it so that in the dreams that are in the book, I mean, there are some central mysteries in the novel that sort of unravel as the novel progresses, and in the dreams, in subtle and then less subtle ways as the book progresses, you see the dreams sort of doing some of that unraveling a little bit more quickly than our protagonist Cyrus is really consciously aware of. In his conscious life, there are some things that he's trying to figure out that his dream self seems to allude to, kind of obliquely, which was a really fun thing. I mean, I was reading a lot of like Agatha Christie and John Cheever when I was trying to write some of that part of the book, some of that element of the book, to understand how to breadcrumb certain mysteries and the like without making it seem obvious when it happens, and also without making it seem like just utter non sequitur and unearned, right? So yeah, they're a load-bearing part of the book, right? If you flip past them, I mean, you're welcome to read it however you want, and I'll be gratified by the fact that anyone reads it at all. But um, my sense of the experience is that it would be diminished, not just in some, pinky in the air, like seasoning the characters or whatever, but like in real narrative ways.
Yeah, I always find mystery is such a magic trick to me. Everything I think you were laying down, I just was like, what?
That's wonderful. And now if you go back, hopefully you'll see some of those breadcrumbs.
Yeah. All right, now I got to read your book a second time.
I mean, isn't that fun? Like, I mean, we love stuff that works that way, right? Like when you watch Memento and then you go back and watch it again, or Sixth Sense or whatever, right? Like,
yeah. I guess here's my weekend.
You should listen to the audiobook if you. I mean, there are a million books to read, but like if you do read it again, Arian Moayed, the actor, he was in Succession and he's done a lot of things, and is really just a incredible talent. I mean, it feels very like one of these things is not like the other when it says like me and him are named. Like,
that's incredible. That's great casting.
Yeah, well, I mean, and he had a brother who served in the Iran-Iraq War. He speaks fluent Persian. I mean, like it's uncanny, frankly, but his performance on the audiobook really feels transcendent to me. I mean, like in that it transcends the material that I gave him and becomes sort of its own thing, right? If I've had a few people communicate to me that they wanted to reread it, and I always say that I mean, you can do whatever, obviously. I mean, I really think that his performance is pretty extraordinary and elevates the material and makes it new.
Wow. Yeah, another experience I wasn't expecting to have when reading Martyr is I am not versed in poetry, and I found by the end of the book I was like, do I get poetry? Am I getting in? I felt like, it's like you start reading Shakespeare and it feels totally foreign, and then by the end it just fully makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm interested in your process in weaving in poetry.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I am a poet. Like I've called myself a poet since I was like 15 years old, right? That has been, I mean, I've had a million other jobs. I drove forklifts at a Subaru factory, and I have worked every sort of front of house, back of house restaurant job that you can imagine. And I've worked retail and I've substitute taught, but I've always called myself a poet. And it's how I've made meaning of the world, how I figured out what I thought about anything since I was a child, And so, yeah, I mean, again, like it's how I process things. And so I was processing things around the book, like trying to think about how Cyrus would think about the world. And one of the technologies that I have to do that is poetry. And Cyrus is a poet. And so I thought it would be cool to write poems in the voice of Cyrus, thinking about the things that Cyrus would be thinking about, right? And it was I expected my editor, whenever I sold the book, if ever I sold the book, to ask me to take them out, but my editor loved them. Jordan Pavlin at Knopf really got them, is a poetry lover herself, and like understood what they were doing narratively. I'll also say, I have a friend who's a vocal coach, and she always jokes that no one picks up a cello, tries to play it, and then is like, wow, I'm terrible at cello, and tells everyone, I can't play the cello, right? But like everyone is like, oh, I can't really sing, I don't have a good voice, and it's like, well, of course you haven't trained it, you haven't done anything, like you just tried to do with it. And I feel like poetry is the same way, right? Like it's just, of course, when you first read, Shakespeare, when you first read Beowulf or whatever, like it's gonna feel inscrutable, and then you try and then it opens up like you described, right? And I think that that way that poetry is taught, where it's kind of like strapped down, and it's like the moth in this poem represents A, the poet's mother, B, the poet's exile. Like that sort of forensic reading of poetry, it feels so antithetical to the spirit of why I love poetry so much, which is to say it's an encounter. Like, I mean, we're talking on Zoom right now, and like if a hawk flew in that window and like came and landed here on the Zoom screen, right, it wouldn't mean anything, right? It would be, we would just both gasp because it's an extraordinary encounter with something beautiful that is not of us, that is like moving independently of us in the universe and is autonomous and not contingent upon our awareness, and we understand this with music, right? Like you can listen to Ave Maria and weep, or you can listen to Future and get hyped for a run, right? But for whatever reason, we don't extend that to poetry, right? It's just, I mean, the way that I love it is as an encounter, and I don't know that one has to freight it with much more than that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. We're so looking forward to having you in Chicago. We have you on October 26th at Northwestern University in a beautiful room. What are going to be your stops in Chicago?
Well, I'd like to make a stop at Reza's restaurant in Andersonville, but it just closed down.
Yeah.
So I'll probably visit Women and Children first in Andersonville, which is my favorite bookstore in the city, and which used to be down the block from Reza's, and unfortunately now Reza's is no longer there. Maybe I'll make the schlep out to another one of the Reza's satellite locations, but
Yeah.
mostly I'm looking forward to seeing Women and Children first, and also seeing my friends. One of my oldest friends, Lindsay, lives in Chicago, and one of my best friends, Eve, lives in Chicago. So I'm looking forward to seeing my pals. Seeing John Green, with whom I'm doing the event, is going to be really fun. And yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yes, it's going to be, I had to quote this, it's going to be two charming speakers making the room completely disappear. You and John Green.
I love John. I mean, I could listen to John read the phone book. I think he's one of the smartest people that I have ever met. I think he's extraordinarily intelligent, and it's met with a real commitment to leveraging that on behalf of his species, right? Which is not always the case among the like ultra intelligent, he really, really, I mean, he does a lot that the world knows about, and he does even more that no one will ever find out about, and I admire him so much.
How did you guys meet?
We were both Indiana people. I taught at Purdue for 5 years. It's not a lot of, I mean, Indiana's a small state.
Admittedly, my very first question when I started reading your book that I wrote down was, what did Indiana do to you? No.
Oh, I don't know. Indiana is, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like anywhere that you live for a long time, there are things that you love and things that you resent, and there are things that you're allowed to say about the state that other people aren't allowed to say. You know what I mean? Like, it's like if another person said some of the stuff who'd never been there, I'm like, well, you leave it alone, but that I feel a little bit more proprietary about.
That makes absolute sense. Well, we can't wait to have you. It's going to be a really interesting chat. Congratulations on your National Book Award long list.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's gratifying to know that anyone cares.
Yeah, well, it's a wonderful list and lots of good recommended reading to add.
Totally 100%. I'm reading Rejection right now, which is an extraordinary new novel by Tony Tullett, and I think I had never read him before, and I am just rapturously, like, I'm rolling around laughing, and then I'm like, oh my God, like this is like actually, it sneaks up on you because it's so funny that the heart of it sneaks up on you. Richard Pryor said he wanted to get you laughing so your mouth would be open when he poured the poison down, and I feel like that's really the project of that book too.
Yeah, wow. And it seems like here's the other thing I wanted to ask. It seems like a big project like this is putting you into discovery mode too.
Yeah, very permeable to the world writ large, which is honestly a dangerous way to move through this world. But I found it. I mean, I hope the novel reflects that fullness.
Yeah. And my last question for you is, I'm someone who toils away at projects a lot. I find completing them is something I can do, but it's not easy and it's not necessarily pleasant. What does it feel like to be on the other side of a big project?
Yeah, I don't know that I'm on the other side of it, to be honest. I mean, I'm still sort of shepherding it through the world, which feels sort of part of it, right? You do your due diligence making good work, and then you do your due diligence getting the word out so that it might be able to find the people for whom it might be useful. And that's a different part of the Venn diagram, but it's still, I think it matters in terms of, again, leveraging what you have and what you've made to do as much good as possible. But that said, I mean, every manuscript I've ever turned in has had claw marks all over it. You know what I mean? Like I hang on to things for the last possible second until, whichever editor I'm working with rips it out of my hands.
Well, you did it. Good job.
Thank you so much. This was a real privilege.
You got it. Thanks, Kaveh.
Yeah, thanks.
For more information on Kaveh Akbar and his live Chicago Humanities talk on October 26th, check out the show notes or head to chicagohumanities.org. Chicago Humanities Tapes is produced, edited, and hosted by me, Alisa Rosenthal, with story editing and copywriting assistance from the team at Chicago Humanities. New episodes of Chicago Humanities Tapes drop first thing every other Tuesday morning wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, give us a rating, share with your friends, and scroll through our wonderful backlog of programs to discover a gem that might surprise you. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode for you. A spooky episode, just in time for Halloween. But in the meantime, stay human.